Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Sree Srinivasan here. Welcome to another episode of X Teaches Sree About Why. It's a virtual salon series that we started so that we can extend the feeling that we have with our in-person salons into the digital world. We can't really match it properly, but before we get our friend Heather Timmons to come one day to New York and be in an actual salon, I thought this would be a fun way to chat with her. She has an amazing assignment at The Guardian, as you can see, covering consumer rage and corporate power at The Guardian. She's a former White House editor for Reuters, a former correspondent and editor in India for the New York Times. Some of you will remember Ink Talks. Sorry, India Inc. I'm
India
sorry,
Inc. Yes.
India Inc. That's right. She
Right.
used to edit and run that, and
That
a very important newsletter of its time. And I'm sorry that that doesn't exist anymore. But she's going to teach me today about consumer rage. And I'm going to start by asking her to define it. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the cases of consumer rage we see. I tried, Heather, as you can see in this little graphic, to have my Bitmoji represent consumer rage. How do you think I'm doing there with that?
It's wonderful. And The Guardian made a thing for our first story, which is just a bunch of hands throwing like shopping carts in the air. And every time I look at it, I laugh. I'm like, I'm so angry.
Okay,
Um,
you're in DC today, right? You're in
I'm
DC.
in DC. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've got to ask you about that lovely picture behind you.
Oh, yes, that was taken in front of the Taj Hotel down in Bandra.
Okay,
And it
in
is
Mumbai. Yeah.
by Candy Fight,
Oh,
actually,
oh,
wife of Lydia Polgreen. And I've had
okay.
it hanging up here. My house looks like India and China got in a fight and India won. A friend of mine calls the style early foreign correspondent. So it's just
I love
stuff,
it.
you know.
I love the what is that? A lampshade
Yeah, it's like
or chandelier? Yeah,
India. See, India wins in this
yeah.
house.
Indian. All right. So covering consumer rage. Over to you. Tell us everything.
Well, I have been thinking about this idea for a long time because before I covered India and I covered politics, I was a business reporter. I was the banking editor at Business Week. My first jobs were covering this industry that barely existed called subprime lending. And so I followed that sort of going as it rose up. And I realized while I was covering politics here in Washington, D.C., that there was something missing when we had conversations about corporations and businesses. And the thing that was missing was that there was almost no more business coverage from a consumer point of view. Like I feel like when I grew up in the 80s, there was enough sort of like, are you getting screwed over by Verizon? We're on your side. We're going to fight for you. There was a lot of local news organizations, whether they were TV or they were print, that were doing sort of like, we're here to defend you. We're here to look and see whether or not these companies are treating you fairly. And all of that reporting just poofed right up. There is, and to be fair, some of the NBC stations and some of the local TV stations are still doing some of those we're on your side kind of guys. But as all the regional newspapers disappeared, many of them had a consumer columnist. They had somebody that could tell you whether, T-Mobile was actually treating its customers fairly or whether your local electricity company was or some such. All gone, just gone, gone, gone. And so um, after I stopped being the White House editor at Reuters, which was right after the 2024 election, I I started thinking about this idea about what was missing. There really is something missing right now. And then I started just talking to people about it, and every person that I talked to had a story. And I'm sure you have three about I was on the phone with so and so because I was trying to get this thing refund because they overcharged me for this. Like everybody has seven stories. And in fact, like half of America seems to be fighting with every company you do business with several hours every day. I talk to people who have like Friday night is like fight with Bill company and Bill's night with them and their wife now. People are arranging their lives around the fact that companies are making it very difficult for you to get the services and the goods that you paid for. And if you want to complain, they make that even harder. So I just thought it was like, it's just that sort of zeitgeisty moment that you're like, everybody's so mad. It feels like it's a good time to do this. There is also, data wise, there's a great survey called the Consumer Rage Study. And that comes out, and that recently said that sort of, consumer rage against companies is really at a peak and complaints are at a peak. So we have some data to back that up too. But we did our first story in June, and something like 500,000 people read it within 24 hours. I mean, it was just phenomenal. And we just asked for people to write in and tell me your consumer rage stories. And I have letters and I have more letters. And it's been really like, I don't know, it's been reaffirming in terms of how journalism is supposed to work and how you're supposed to feel as a journalist. Also, really interesting because I took a lot of those letters of people with their complaints about X, Y, and Z, and we just ran sort of a here's what people are complaining about kind of story. And of course, I went back to every single company and was like, this person says this about that. And this company that would not respond to their customer for weeks or months at a time got back to me within 24 hours or
Sure.
three sometimes. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And that to me says, wow, they're spending money on marketing. Nobody's spending money on customer service. They care about how they look marketing wise, but they don't really care about the customer experience. And that it's just sort of grown from there.
Wow. And that's something that we all care about, and that's why we're talking about it. By the way, I think I made a mistake and I said you cover consumer rage, but I think you're actually it's consumer rights, but I used the R
Well,
word and I put
you,
rage.
you know what? I started jokingly when I was cooking this project up and pitching it to people. I started calling it the Consumer Rage Project. I mean, the Guardian decided not to call it that because I think you don't want people thinking that we're giving recipes for Molotov cocktails. That's
Right.
not it. It's like the opposite of that. It's like these are the things that are broken that need to be fixed so that
Sure.
people don't get so angry that they're throwing Molotov cocktails.
And you called it consumed, and I like that. And this was
Yes,
just
not
happens
my
to be your latest piece. It's called "Not Your Imagination: From Backpacks to Food, Consumer Goods Are Getting Worse." Is it possible to avoid the continuing decline in quality of consumer products brought on by corporate greed? So this is a
that's
fascinating story.
subhead. I did not write that subhead, but I love
Right.
it.
I'm going to just put this in the chat so everyone can read it as we're
Yeah.
talking, so people can find it.
Hmm.
But the idea here, I think, is important that we know about not stagflation, shrinkflation, right?
Hmm.
That as prices go up, people just
Hmm.
do less and less of the same thing and charge the same or even more. So round that out. What else does this involve in terms of quality and the problems we see at a time when I think a lot of people appreciate artisanal products and craftsmanship and all of this at the highest possible level now. But your point is sort of everything's now kind of sucks.
Yeah, I mean, and I wrote this because I had started to look at one particular industry, and then I came across this guy. He was a University of Edinburgh grad student, and he had just started this project he's been doing himself, just taking a look industry by industry at private equity and takeovers and consolidation, and what happened to the quality of the products after that. And he started this whole thing because he went to buy a backpack, and the backpack he remembered, the brands he remembered, and he's 30. The brands he remembered, as a kid, so the quality was terrible. And he was like, what happened? And it turns out that one company took over a bunch of the same companies, and they're doing the thing that we're all so used to, which is just sort of what companies think they should do now, which is like squeeze the profits a little bit, slice off a little bit of the expenditure here, make sure the numbers go up for investors. And then when you do that, eventually the quality is just garbage. And so he started to sort of overlay private equity takeovers, corporate takeovers with brand names. And it turns out that a bunch of things like, Pyrex, cookware brands that Americans know and have used for generations have been taken over by XYZ private equity company. And the same thing happens with them. And you'll see the quality decline. So he created this database that basically tells you, you can look up different company names and you can look up their corporate background, and he ranks them, on whether he thinks you should buy them or avoid them, or, based on their corporate background, which I thought was fascinating.
And I think that really will help people understand how bad things have become. Did you see any quality anybody trying to do is who out there is trying to be better as a consumer facing company? Who is we're going to
Yeah,
talk a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
bad news, but can you give me some hope?
I will tell you, let's see. The company that comes up again and again that's a big company is Chewy, that people
Yeah,
seem to like,
sure.
and they seem to invest in customer service and things like that. There's a lot of little brand names that haven't been bought up yet, that keep trying that are still producing the same quality products that they were a generation ago. Um,
So just for people who don't know it, Chewy, Chewy, is a pet food and pet products
Yeah,
company.
they do
And
like pet food,
yeah,
but they do this whole thing. And I think they try to keep track of you and your animals, and they send you flowers if your animal dies, but they also, like everything shows up on time, and they haven't decided to like squeeze the profits.
right.
Um,
And I think that's such an important point that consumers will reward you for good service. And it's just not something that everybody is trying to do. Let's see who's watching and who has questions and comments. Let's see here. Zach is watching from Bohemia in South Bohemia in the Czech Republic. He's my newsletter partner and producer, so he'll be putting this all together with me for our newsletter. And Rita says my interests are so narrow. Twyla says she's on the Upper West Side. I have rage from Trump's media availability yesterday. I'm singing. And Rita says this is such a great topic for where I come from. Global digital services, where consumer experience is a huge business segment. So, do you find that some of the digital only products and companies do a better job than some of the physical ones?
Digital only in terms of they are like Google or
Yeah,
something, you
yeah,
mean? Like
something like
they're,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, this has, unfortunately, this sort of, the phenomenon that I talked about with private equity takeovers, but it has been happening with every big company that we know of. We've had a real rise in shareholder and activist shareholder rights
Mhm.
in the United States particularly, and what this has translated into is that CEOs who cannot make the numbers keep going up are really worried about getting fired right away. And so this professor from Columbia University called it this gun to the head pressure they have right now to like make sure the numbers keep going up. That is happening in every industry, and I think that we have, we're experiencing some of it with something like Google. Google search has changed, and we can see it now. You can see in your Gmail, there's tons of sponsored ads now that are rolling through. I mean, just sort of, it's happening across industries. I don't think that there is particularly a I don't think I mean in some there's an argument that digital services in some way are leading this, and I don't know if you've read the Cory Doctorow book and Shitification, but
Mm,
it is based particularly on the tech industry and how they use this model of making sure that you are in their system and that you have to rely on them, and then they just squeeze you and make things worse.
yeah.
And that sort of that phrase has become a little bit of a catchphrase for this consumer rage that we're all feeling too, for this phenomenon that's making us feel consumer rage. There's a Reddit group that's just called Inshitification right now, and it is where people go in and they complain about how everything used to be better, and it starts to feel a little bit like we're all like, oh my God, old man yells at cloud, but things did used to be better. Like we're not crazy old people.
And so that's a very important question before we go to audience questions, is this idea that the stock market is at all-time highs, lots of profits. What do you, apart from the stock market that you were saying is putting that pressure, are there no bosses who insist on quality down the line? What is happening there? The QA is a term, quality assurance, that we didn't have a generation ago, and now people know what QAing means, and there are so many people who have those kinds of jobs. Do you is that what where's the problem lie apart from obviously the money factor? Is it the kind of pride in the products? Can you talk about that a little bit?
That's such a good question. And having been a business reporter for so many years before I did everything else, that was the first question I kept asking is like, what happened? Like, why did everybody decide it was okay to treat their customers terrible and just shrug? And one example of that is when the World Cup first started, I'm sure you remember there were all these horror stories about people buying tickets on StubHub.
Hmm.
And then the tickets didn't show up, or they didn't get the tickets or whatever, and they had spent tens of thousands of dollars shipping their family around. It was the trip of a lifetime and no tickets. Da, da, da. As all these stories were rolling across the headlines, StubHub stock was like going up because some analyst had decided maybe right before the World Cup started that it was going to be good for them. So there is just this disconnect between what's happening with the stock market and the day-to-day lived experience of so many Americans who are using these products. It's just not, they don't even, I don't know, they don't relate anymore. And I think any CEO that you talk to will say, yeah, we care about quality, but it just feels like there has been a fundamental shift in how CEOs view their job, and investor profits is first, and making sure that they still have a job, because we're all human. Everybody wants to make sure you still have a job, but there's not a whole lot of there's also not a whole lot of people that made their, sort of clawed their way up from the mailroom, used to deliver the product, used to make the product. Those guys, there was a great wave of CFOs who took over companies, and
Sure.
and people with finance backgrounds who took over companies, and it's just not, it just feels different.
Hey, look at this. A shout out to Indra Nui from Twyla. She's a former Pepsi CEO, as you know, and is an example of a CEO who did not screw the customer, who planned for longevity and even health in a business that, of course, is inherently not so healthy for
Sure.
her own customers. So I have a couple of observations and comments, and then
Hmm.
we're going to go to questions from the audience. So folks, type in your questions. We want to hear from you. And then, as I said, at some point, we will turn off the recording so that people can ask you directly some questions. So two observations. One is that my own effort at doing this is my first time running a consumer business of sorts myself. The in Substack and newsletters, I turned
Hmm.
on the support me for doing the newsletters and stuff, and people are so kind and are paying whatever it is, $5 a month, $50 a year, whatever. And I've learned that it's harder to get $5 from somebody than $5,000 from somebody. I've raised millions of dollars for Columbia, the Met,
Hmm.
Saja, South Asian journalists, and all of that. I've learned this, and you feel a direct connection to your audience when you have a product, when you have consumers like that. And this is my way of trying to innovate and make it worth their while to continue to support what we're doing. And we're not saying, you do it and then you get a free map or you get a mouse pad, right? People do it because they want to support something good. So I really appreciate everybody who's watching, who's a paid subscriber to us. It really means a lot. But that idea that you have this one-on-one relationship is so important. Can you reflect on that a little bit, please?
Well, I think, I mean, just to draw it all back to journalism, which we're talking about, the rise of Substack has been such a reflection of the fact that things are missing from mainstream journalism. The fact that, so many people have these Substacks that are making them decent money or making them a living wage anyway, whatever it is. And they're on these very fascinating topics that I don't even see covered anywhere in the mainstream media. It's just a reflection of how much, the industry itself is missing, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
it really is. And I do, that one-on-one connection is great. Like I said, I get reader mail like I've never gotten before. And I used to get, when you cover politics, you just get angry reader mail, and especially in this era, as the White House bureau chief during the Biden era, I got hate mail. I mean, covering China, I got hate mail. Covering India, I got hate mail. I get thoughtful letters from across the political spectrum from people with day-to-day kitchen table problems being like, I don't know how to fix this. What do I do? I tried this, I tried this, I tried this. It's making me crazy. Very many of them are very well educated, upper middle class people who are like, why can't I fix this? Like, you know what I mean? I'm a tax attorney. I know how to do this. How is it that I am in an AI doom loop that I can't get my $9 refunded that I'm supposed to be? And it's making them crazy,
right.
you know?
And they'll spend much more than $9 of their time
Well,
to get that. I heard my daughter today on the phone. We have the joke in the house that, when I'm trying to get an agent, I'll be like, agent, agent, operator, operator. I just keep saying that and again and again. I don't, in a louder voice. I don't think it actually helps. And maybe you can tell me if that works or not. But you want to get a human on the line. And
right.
the amazing thing I saw that's happening now, you remember when ATMs came around, they said there'll be end of bank tellers. Now, places like Capital One, like Chase, are saying, come in, we have humans to talk to. And there's actually a pretty good ad, I think it's from Chase, that talks about don't talk to don't talk to a bot, talk to a human. So I think people will reward them for that. So before I go to questions, I do want to ask you about, as you talked about upper middle class, rich people, we are seeing that people are getting such luxury treatment, such high-end stuff, right? In airlines and in travel,
Mhm.
in other areas, just hotel, I mean, restaurant reservations, right? There are all these now these special lanes and the equivalent of a HOV lane that is too expensive for most regular people to get into. What do you think that's going to do to consumers and consumer rage as you see the environment?
Yeah, it's been really fascinating to watch because it's like the K-shaped economy, but it is the K-shaped consumer spending, where it's like if you can afford it, you can probably get, you can get into that better tier gold class, blah, 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 which is supposed to be better, and sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But I don't know, what does it say about the state of America right now? It's just what an anti-democratic idea. That i- we all that it's a bank. Let's say it's a bank. It's backed by the FDIC, which is supported by the US government, which is funded by taxpayers. it, it's going to give you better service all the time if you've got a lot of money. And in many ways some of those things have been, but just the idea that that's going to trickle down through the whole economy, that there's no democratic line standing, that there's no sort of even playing field anymore for anything that we do as a consumer is really sad. I don't know.
I totally agree. One place in Manhattan where you see kind of democratic line standing is Shakespeare in the Park.
Yeah.
And I went to see
Mhm.
Winter's Tale. I was able to get tickets because a friend uh, works there, so I did have access, obviously.
See,
But
you
the
got
fact
that.
that that's one place where people of all backgrounds, all races, you get the same ticket if you're willing to stand in line and put in that effort. Let's remind everyone that the way to reach Heather, you can find her on social, LinkedIn, all of those places, but you can also write to her column if you want to get something into her attention, is consumed at theguardian.com. Consumed at theguardian.com.
Thank
So
you.
please write in and tell your friends that if they complain, tell them write to Heather, tell them to check out her website and her stuff. We're going to audience questions now. Tara is asking, what do you think about this ever-growing movement of brands creating distinct personas on social media? Wendy's is the example that comes to mind. They roast other fast food brands on Twitter, go viral, but I'm not buying a burger because of it. Do you think these funny or relatable personas actually make consumers feel better about a company? And I guess at what point does the personality become a distraction from the brand itself?
You know what's interesting? I think we're seeing those with a lot of the small dollar value, like fast food. You know what I mean? Like those are the Mr. Peanut is out there. It's like it's not CVS where you have to go and get your prescription. Like my CVS pharmacy is not down out there with zingers. And the CVS pharmacy is where people have the most problems. You know what I mean? It's not like so it's cute and fun, I guess, with fast food. I mean, does anybody have any long-term complaints about your fast food company? No, it's a quick small
Unless you're Taco
transaction.
Bell right now in the middle of the lettuce crisis. So,
Yeah,
well,
that's true.
everybody, yeah.
That's true. That's true.
How do you
But
bounce back?
you
What is
don't
your
see that. Remember JP Morgan tried to be funny on Twitter. Do you remember this? I can't remember
vaguely,
what
yeah,
the issue was. They
vaguely.
decided to be like whatever and they just get destroyed. It was just you're like, well, maybe you shouldn't have funded the blah blah blah. It was just there's a time and a place for that kind of stuff, I think, and it is not your health insurer.
Sure. Rita says the story of stuff.org is the first place that started me thinking about things not lasting, corporates wanting us to buy more and destroying the environment along the way. What
Mhm.
got you started in this journey of wanting to cover consumer stuff? And everyone check out storyofstuff.org.
Yeah, no, I really do think it was just my I will tell you, just because this is a journalisty audience, we had a conversation when I was at Reuters where it was a bunch of editors we were talking about. I can't remember what the issue was. It might have been the UAW strike or something. And one of the editors was like, well, but a company's main point is to make money. And I was like, oh my God, like this is sort of like the mindset even of business journalists right now is so
Mhm.
removed from we've all been taught that this is the point. It's so removed from the actual consumer experience, from actual people's everyday lived lives. And that to me felt like one of the reasons that mainstream media feels like it's out of touch too. And so it was like those kind of like things just kept going off in the back of my head where I was like, what's going on? Why is journalism missing this big story that I'm seeing everybody talk about in front of me, which is stuff falling apart and not being able and being overcharged constantly to the point where it feels like, and guess what, it is on purpose. You know what I mean? And then not being able to get anybody on the phone to give you the refund that you deserve. So it was like a bunch of little things really more than anything else.
Yeah, and here we are.
And here we
Jonathan
are.
says I had so many problems with CVS that I found a classic mom and pop pharmacy. Hours are not convenient and the service is eccentric, but not but so much not CVS.
And they hate me, but I love them. No, I
There are no HIPAA
it's like
rules
that
at a
Tom Waits
pharmacy,
song.
right?
It's
When they're
like your
shouting out.
waitress hates you. Yeah. Um, I had a local mom and pop pharmacy here in DC, and they fired me. They were like, "Listen, the drug provider makes it so expensive for us to give you this medication that we have to send you to CVS."
No,
So,
that's too bad. Yeah. I mean, what is that famous line? Like, I hate the soup, but I want more of it. Like, it's like
yes,
that's
yes.
one thing I wanted to mention. And folks, please think of some more questions. And as I said, we'll turn off the recording so that you can ask her.
Let me, you know what, and this might one thing that I think just be the doing this just for a few months that
Yeah,
I have decided is would be really helpful for the industry is if I can figure out how to seed a whole bunch of consumer reporters. I mean, like I said, there used to be across the country consumer rights columns. There were reporters in every major newspaper whose job it was to cover business from a consumer rights angle. And I have been trying to think about raising money. There's a lot of people aware that this is a problem. And
mhm.
there seems to be a lot of money out there sort of to fund journalism and to think about new models for journalism. And so that's one thing I'm just sort of thinking about. I
I,
don't know
I love
how
that.
it
I'm
works
sure
or where it
people.
works, but just my small experience of going to the companies after people had written me letters and saying, and then all these people, most of them got their problems fixed, and they had after months of struggle. I'm
Sure.
like, that's it. Maybe that's just all it takes in from our corner of the world. You know what
Sure.
I mean? If you're a journalist, if you're a
Sure.
hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so
Yeah.
I'm like, well, we'll fix it with journalism. There's a lot of other structural problems, obviously, but
But
this is one thing.
yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I encourage
Mhm.
you to do that. I will say that, as you mentioned, in the TV world, there is still that element of a lot of consumer reporters who are like
Sure.
seven on your side, and I will
Yeah,
go
yeah, yeah.
and ambush the CEO for you, and all of that
Hmm.
stuff. That's definitely there, and we are seeing that continue. I was also at dinner with someone who works at Consumer Reports, and he was saying how successful Consumer Reports continues to be. It still charges money, it still
Hmm.
does
Hmm.
very well. And there was a blog that I loved called Consumerist that they bought many years ago and added it to their repertoire of things. And I think the New York Times Wirecutter also plays a role in this ecosystem, does it not? As
Yeah,
all of
yeah.
those
And
recommendations and stuff. Yeah,
there's definitely people doing really good work. And ProPublica does good work on this. There's a bunch of local, news organizations that have sprung up. Consumer Reports continues to be good. I just think that just the presence of, in every state or in, the
sure,
regional presence, and I do see the TV journalists that you talk about, a lot of it tends to be local companies, they'll
sure.
go to the local car wash or whatever it is. But I mean, it's almost like we're talking about some of these big, let's say big telecom companies or something, and how they're treating their customers.
That's you. That's you. You're
Yeah,
going to be the one doing that, and
right.
you are going to make it
I think
and
what
make
I'm
it
saying is
better.
I need help.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you should have, if you haven't thought of it already, just places where forms that people can fill in and be your kind of like equivalent of gasbuddy.com, right? Where you can go in and have your buddy report in problems. If you haven't tried
Hmm.
that, we can talk offline. I just
Yeah,
want to,
yeah, I'd love to.
before we go to the audience, I just want to point out that in 2020, in 2019, in the fall of 2019, there was this idea that we're going to change from just shareholder value to stakeholder value, and that consumers and your customers were part of that. It all went to hell in the pandemic, but it was something that all the CEOs got. 200 of America's leading CEOs issued a statement saying that we care as much about our client, our consumers, we care about the environment, we care about all these things, and that's been poof, it's gone. This is what the Business Roundtable did in August 2019. I was really hopeful. They were saying shareholder primacy is not
Hmm.
privacy. And of course, it's gone to hell after that. But let's see if anybody wants to ask a question on camera while we're recording, and then we'll wrap up and then have you them ask you a couple of questions off camera, so to speak. Twyla says, I think Wirecutter is suspect since the depth of testing is minimal. Interesting. So you're saying, Twyla, I think that Consumer Reports does, much more testing than them. I don't know the difference and how much the Times does without doing that. So that'd be an interesting question. If anyone knows the answer, please jump in. But let's go to Rita, who is willing to be on camera and ask this question. So we're going to bring her on to ask the question. Rita, say hi.
Hi. I definitely have questions to ask off camera as well. But I wanted to ask, actually, I wanted to give a clarification on what I mentioned earlier about being in this industry. So I work in the outsourcing industry, and so customer experience is a thing. And that's where I sort of just wanted to ask, I guess I wanted to just raise the point that it's lent itself to a whole industry where the Shrees of the world are yelling, operator, operator, or, various ways of doing customer experience or customer service in these different industries. And yet it's continuously innovating. And right now there's all this um, mayhem related to what's going to happen with AI and how are we going to save even more money and be able to keep more profits for ourselves, which is sort of the point I was getting at earlier. But yeah, I mean, I think I don't really have a question. It was more of an observation that this whole industry has come out of these bad customer experiences. And I do remember one company in India that was trying to, instead of get the business of answering the customer's angry calls, saying, actually, I'd like to analyze all the problems that you have and help you solve them so that you can have a better customer experience without people complaining. And the company ended up saying, no, we don't want to pay for that. We want to pay you, pennies on the dollar to answer these angry customer calls and, give all of your employees bad nightmares and mental
That's
health.
really, I've talked to a bunch of people in AI customer service and also former and current customer service heads, and I haven't written this story yet really, but that is sort of across the board what they say is that CEOs are not interested in spending the money to fix the problems at all. And and this is something I've been thinking about a lot just because I spent so much time in India writing about outsourced different things and not just customer service, but all up the value chain, really important. But the very idea that big American companies decided that they were going to send their customer service somewhere else decades ago like started this whole thing that it's somebody else's problem. You know what I mean? It's not the person that runs that customer service department, in India who is brilliant and has a bunch of people working really hard for them can probably tell you what all those problems are, like you said. But this person over here just does not. They don't care, and they haven't had to care for decades. You know what I mean? Like they haven't. The business model has been so like this experience is over here, it's a cost for so many years that there's not much conversation. We had so many conversations in America about bringing back manufacturing and bringing back this, bringing back that, but nobody said like, let's bring back customer service. I think there's one or two people that
Hmm.
tried. Southwest, I think, had moved people over. There's one or two companies that said they were going to have it all
Or they say you're
back in the
calling
US.
America. They'll say they make that a point and say you're talking to someone in America. And
Yeah.
I had a friend who was involved in a process of teaching, retraining fishermen in Newfoundland to be customer service agents for American companies because of the time zone and things like that. And that was quite the adventure, as you can imagine, doing that. But it was at least people were trying things, and I think people do value having that. Some of it is xenophobic, some of it is racist and all of that. But with
Sure.
AI, some of that will, I think, even out a little bit. Jonathan says, Consumer Reports is still the gold standard of testing. Wirecutter is a little too fond of links to Amazon, is what he says. So before we turn off the recording, I just want to have Heather give us a plug for not just her work, but also The Guardian. And why it matters and why people should all sign up to be subscribers and support The Guardian. I like how they tell you how many stories you've read
Right,
this year on The
right, you
Guardian. I
cheap
think,
bastard. You've
yeah.
read 17 stories. Give us money. No, I love it. The Guardian's audience right now is phenomenal in the United States and growing really fast. And I think it's because of the lack of a paywall, but I think it is also because of the way that they are doing their reporting. And I really noticed, I was still at Reuters, but when Charlie Kirk was killed, and there was all this sort of machinations at different publications about what do we call the way that he talks about people of color, and what do we say this way, that. And the Guardian just did this box that was like Charlie Kirk in his own words, and him speaking about African Americans and women and this and that, with a link to the video of him saying it. And that's it. That's what they ran. And I was
Mhm.
like, see, this is what you know what I mean? It's like that clean, like we don't need to tie ourselves up in knots. This is the information. And I think I find it again and again when they do reporting on political related things or business related things, again, it's that like, this is what's going on. And they seem to have not been caught up in some of the sort of, I don't know. I should stop now.
Okay, so
They are
everybody
doing a really good
support.
job, and I would, and they're growing fast, and they're lovely people.
So everybody support The Guardian if you can. And we'll before we turn off the camera, just this question from Tyler: how much would it cost to fix these problems? CEO compensation bonuses are often tied to reducing expenses.
I mean, there are, and we didn't get into this, but some of the background of these problems is also consolidation. There's not as many choices anymore. There's not as much competition. I don't think you can put private equity has bought up a whole bunch of stuff. I don't, I don't know how you put a number on that. Like it feels like the more I report on it, the more structural and endemic it feels. So, and I know that's really depressing. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, it
I
is.
mean, I just I think it's got to be somebody who decides they don't care about money. Imagine
Well, who is
in
that? Who's that
in the
man?
year of our Lord 2026. But it's got to be like I don't know. It's got to be a different way of thinking about things, and maybe that will come in that way that we saw that pendulum swing to we care about every stakeholder to this. Maybe that's what's next.
All right. So we're going to turn off the camera now. And as a bonus to our paid subscribers, we're going to have them talk to Heather for just 5-10 minutes if they have any questions or comments. So we're going to turn off this. And one of the things that I didn't ask you on purpose in front of everybody, because it's such a weighty question, is the story of what happened with the United Healthcare CEO and how this idea of loosely using the term consumer rage, in that case, we saw the ultimate manifestation of that
Sure, sure, sure.
and the
You know
problem
what?
of
And in thinking about this, I meant to bring that up publicly. I mean, you can't, it is the elephant in the room. That is, that is the ultimate thing that happened. I mean, we don't know. I don't know what happened in his head. We don't know what happened with his family. We don't know. But if we are to piece together what we see so far, he was upset with the company for perhaps the way that they had treated him or his family.
sure.
And he made a plan to go and get revenge. And the thing that was, and that of none of us in our right mind would do that. That's a crazy thing to do. But the thing that happened afterwards that was so remarkable was polling that you saw where everyday Americans were like, well, like I have been that mad at my healthcare company before. Like your health insurer is health insurers are systematically denying people coverage that is making their lives worse or maybe even killing them. It is a thing that's happening now. This is not a controversial thing for me to say. We have read all the reporting and we see it.
Sure.
And they're making cost over human lives decisions. And that, I mean, and that's the worst case scenario for
No, of course.
this. And I do think that there is some discussion among corporate America about how that's the worst case scenario. I fear that probably that discussion goes to, well, we have to double check everybody who says they're an investor and not let them come to our investor meetings or our shareholder or whatever. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
they're going to take the wrong lessons from this, which is that we need more security rather than we need to treat customers better.
Right. And that's certainly for a conversation for another day. So I'm
Yep.
stopping the recording, but thanking Heather for joining us. She was just so fantastic to spend time with her. Thank you very much, Heather.